If there is a medium that has the potential to be terrifying, it's definitely video games. You might get the creeps while reading a novel, or jump from your seat in a horror movie, but there's nothing like being in control of the characters, exploring the environments, and making all of the hard decisions. Video games are always the best option to get fully immersed in a horror atmosphere. Now, if you look for the scariest video games of all time, you will probably get titles like the Silent Hill or Resident Evil saga, or even more recent games like Outlast, Visage, or Layers of Fear. But these all have something in common. They're all 3D, and most likely they will be from this century. That makes me think, when did video games start getting scary? While it is true that sensibilities to horror have changed a lot during the last 2 decades, the truth is horror in video games has been present from the early years of gaming, way before the advent of popular titles like Resident Evil or even its precursor, Alone in the Dark. No, in the olden times you were meant to be scared in a low resolution, with the aid of simple graphics and occasional text. So let's dive into the early history of horror video games and see if we can find any nightmare fuel for tonight. Hello, Spooky here. Spooky games for spooky people. If the algorithm brought you to this channel, heed your call and maybe stay for a while. If you've been here before, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about early horror video games. From the Atari 2600 to the Commodore 64, this medium has always been fertile for exploring horrifying stories and uncanny atmospheres. If you find this video informative or entertaining at all, please remember to leave a like and subscribe, but only if you think I deserve it. So stay till the end and make your own conclusions. One of the earliest examples I could find of horror in video games is the Atari 2600 title Haunted House from 1982. The very first thing you will notice is the cover. Wow, it's fucking awesome. Look at those eyes depicting real fear and insanity, bats hanging upside down and a big-ass spider, all imbued in this gritty color palette that kind of looks like dried blood. Apparently there was another initial cover, but it was rejected due to the position of the eyes. I can't wait to play this game. Let's begin. So what is this? So I'm a pair of eyes in the dark, which I guess truly honors the cover art. And what am I even doing? What are these numbers on the bottom part of the screen? You see, the thing with early video games is that they usually didn't include any on-screen instructions, so you had to read the manual. And here it is. The game's even got a story about an old man called Zachary Graves and a magic urn. So you, the eyes, get inside the haunted manor looking for the parts of the urn. You could say this game predates the now commonplace look for 5 pages or 7 dolls shit you see in lots of modern indie horrors. The game has 9 game variations, so that's what this number meant, each with different levels of difficulty. On the first level, for example, you can clearly see the layout of the house, and there are only a few enemies. On the last level, it's completely dark and you get a ton of baddies after you, which can pass through closed doors and even go up and down the stairs. The game mechanics are actually quite good. The goal of the game is to collect all pieces of the urn, which are randomly scattered throughout each one of the 4 floors. However, you can only see objects when you're lighting a match, so you'll have to explore every pixel of the screen, lest you miss it. On the last level, you can really see the position of doors or staircases, so you'll pretty much have to memorize your way up and down. You get a magic scepter, which makes you invisible to most enemies. But you can only hold one item at a time, which means you'll have to drop it when you find the master key, or any piece of the urn. Ideally, you should collect all pieces of the urn and get back to the entrance, but that's a rather difficult task. I could beat the game on level 3 easily, but I was having a real hard time on level 9. You might have the pieces, but you'll get fucked on your way down due to running into closed doors or being chased by this muffo. So what I did was try to draw a map of the levels and point the positions of every part of the urn. This way I could open every door first, pick up the pieces and run back to the entrance. But that didn't work either. Turns out the bats will pick up an item and leave it on a different spot in the house. Now that's a dick move. My final strategy was to pick up the pieces one by one, get it back to the entrance as soon as I got it and just leave it there. In the end, I beat the game. Maybe I was just lucky these bastards didn't carry the pieces elsewhere. What can I say? I actually had fun with this one. I'd say it was the first horror game to implement reduced visibility and a limited inventory system, which was common in later survival horror games. It was also one of the first games to use scrolling instead of changing individual screens. After the success of Haunted House for the Atari, horror was becoming a more attractive market for gamers. And what's more profitable than an original horror title? That's right, licensed horror titles. 1 year later we get the Halloween game, based on the classic slasher, Halloween, by John Carpenter. They really wanted to make this clear, since not only did they include the original movie poster, but they even included the title from the poster, Halloween, Halloween? So I'm going to learn my lesson and go straight to the game manual. The babysitter character. The killer? Why not include the actual names for the characters? Was this a copyright thing? I mean, they already had the name for the game in the original art, So this isn't Michael Myers? Anyway, the point of the game is to protect children in this house and take them to the safe room, which is just the end of the hallway. Occasionally, the killer will appear with the Halloween theme song. You can either run the other way or get into one of these doors or even dodge the killer by making him pass right in between. This would have been cool if it had been a strategy that you figure out by yourself, but no, it's literally in the manual. This game is so easy, the only reason I got killed was because I got bored and distracted. But what the? Holy fuck, this must have been the goriest game of its time. What if it kills the child? Oh god. In the end, I was just letting myself get killed, just for the fun. There is also an option for stabbing Michael Myers, which consists in finding a knife and timing the attack. But it isn't fun at all. Overall, this is probably one of the worst video games I have ever played. It's so short and boring and cheap. Even some of the cartridges were infamously labeled with a piece of tape. Now this is too much. This might be no surprise, but the Halloween game was a failure, and it drove Wizard Games, the developer, to total bankruptcy. Moving on. Another horror franchise that got made into a video game was the Friday the 13th game. Although several games were made for different consoles, the earliest game was developed for the Commodore 64 in 1986 and other home computers of the time. The game advertising also used the original movie posters, which caused a bit of controversy, so a different version of the art omitted the knife. Still, as a response, Domark, the developers, included 2 capsules of fake blood with later versions of the game. Because fuck you, that's why. As for the game, it consists on roaming the different areas around Crystal Lake, trying to find Jason, who appears disguised as one of the teenagers. You know, kind of like an early horror Among Us. Now, how in the world does that make sense? Jason is wearing a mask, isn't he? Or maybe a bag like in the second movie. But even if he didn't wear a mask, he's horribly deformed. Didn't these people watch the movies at all? Part of the gameplay is about preventing Jason from killing the other characters, but I just didn't care. There is a variety of weapons available to defend yourself. So what I did was just pick something up and beat the shit out of everyone I could find. Eventually, one of them will turn out to be Jason. Oh, come on, that is not Jason Voorhees. It's just a dude dressed in black, so he changed clothes immediately after I hit him? What is even this game? Even the developers were kind of ashamed of this. It didn't do very well critically or commercially either. Another game that was made for the Commodore 64 was Mad Doctor. It actually has a very similar look and controls to Friday the 13th. This game is loosely based on the Frankenstein movies. You control Franz Johann Glockenspiel, trying to create a monster from dead body parts. You can freely roam the different areas of the game and find corpses on the graveyard or a crypt, but the game also gives you an option to kill the villagers, so you can have fresh bodies. Now, in theory, the game might look too simple, and it is, but there is a catch. If you don't follow the right steps to create the monster, it might begin to attack the villagers, and even you. So your demonstration at the end of the game won't work. If you want to actually finish the game, you must read some of the documents in the library and get information on how to do it properly. You need the right tools and the right knowledge, so you will have to read some biology books, for example. Aren't I already a doctor and I should know about this? And the most important part is to get different body parts from different people. So it just doesn't work to use a single body to create the monster. Once you finally have the parts, you take the body to a hill, get it struck by lightning, and voila, you may take it to your presentation. If everything goes well, it's game over. For extra challenge, you also have the option of enabling a hunger and sleep system, so you can just do everything at once. But you should skip it. Not gonna lie, I was actually kind of invested in the game. Maybe it's the autism, but there is nothing more satisfying to me than following a rigid set of steps and doing things right the second time around felt like success. But that's just me. So this is it, right? Perhaps horror games need something else to be effectively scary. Maybe a more detailed visual presentation or a more polished sound design. Of course, we can probably blame all this on the technical capabilities of early video games. Maybe horror wasn't meant for this medium back in the day. Unless maybe we needed another type of game. So far, the games we've tried are mostly focused on action, but some of the earliest forays into horror also occurred in adventure games. In the mid-80s, most of this type of games were text-based, meaning you had to input an answer and kind of play a game of syntax guessing. There were no graphics at all, or they were minimal. But in 1986, Icom Simulations released Uninvited, a truly graphic adventure game with a more user-friendly interface, which mostly used the mouse. That is, what we now call point and click. Using graphics as a major part of adventure games meant developers could take the chance to instill fear in the player more effectively, and that's precisely what they tried to achieve with Uninvited. The game was originally developed for the Macintosh, but there is another version available for the NES released in 1999, which is the one I chose to play. For starters, this version has colored graphics instead of the original black and white. It also has simplified text, which even provides some clues for progressing. The premise is about a person who crashes their car outside of an old mansion, only to discover that their sister is missing, or their brother in the original game. You must now explore the house in search of your sibling. The game has an actually creepy atmosphere at first. Only a few minutes into the game, you get your first ghostly apparition, and it's game over. This might be one of the earliest examples of a jump scare in video games. The map is mysterious and pretty well designed. Unfortunately, in this game there are no markers for interactive objects, so you'll probably have to click your way around the house, you know, the so-called pixel hunt, and maybe take a few notes like I did so you won't forget about some important areas or objects that you should go back to later in the game. As usual for early graphic adventure games, there is a lot of bullshit. For instance, I kept dying for no reason at one point. Just by chance, I had picked up a cursed gemstone and I realized I couldn't drop it anywhere. Why not? Can you just leave it where you took it from? Fuck, so my only option was to bury it in the backyard, and that worked. But this is just the beginning. There is a shit ton of useless objects that just take up space in the inventory, and it's painfully slow to pick one of the items and use it in every possible way, just to see if it works. There are some really absurd solutions to puzzles, and some of them will get you killed if you try the wrong items. Then you have to go through the area all over again. At least the visuals for dying are pretty cool, and the descriptions. Holy shit. The game's story is slowly diluted into some magic thing curse nonsense. It's all over the place. You have ghosts and zombies and even this. What? Apple's smiling creature? What kind of drugs were they on? In the end, I was tired of backtracking and pixel hunting, so I just resorted to a guide. Some of this shit is just too easy to miss. I get, in the 80s, with no internet and nothing else to do, it might have been fun to spend hours on end looking for tiny hotspots in graphic adventure games. You didn't make any progress one day? That's alright. Maybe tomorrow. I'll try every single pixel of the next screen and try every single combination. How did they even come up with this shit? It's like the kneeling part in Castlevania 2. How does anyone figure this shit out? So I gave up. The ending is cheesy and not very satisfying. Believe it or not, all of these games were quite controversial for their time. Especially Halloween, which, as tame as it looks now, was considered too violent for its own sake. But even then, there was nothing like Splatterhouse. Splatterhouse is a 1988 game developed for the arcade, and later ported into home consoles and personal computers. The advantage was that arcade cabinets had much more processing and graphic power than home devices, so the visuals were much more detailed than other horror games at the time. The version developed for the TurboGrafx 16 even included a parental label. The horrifying theme of this game may be inappropriate for young children and cowards. Wow. The main character of the game resembles Jason Voorhees. Ironically, he looks more like Jason than the villain from the actual Friday the 13th game. The gameplay is based on a simple beat-em-up formula with some platforming sections. The real meat of the game, however, is the graphic violence. The developers really took their time with the animations. The best part is picking up different weapons to kill enemies, of which there is also a great variety. From zombies to alien creatures, mudmen, giant fetuses, ghosts, wolves, cursed pieces of furniture, and whatever this is. There are only 5 levels, but the visuals are always varied and very interesting. There are even some branching paths on later levels. It's not a very difficult game, the controls are reduced to attacking, jumping and crouching, but the game can still kick your ass with some platforming sections and unfair bosses, very typical of arcade games. There are checkpoints in every different screen, but if you lose all of your lives, you have to start from the beginning. However, the enemies and the bosses behave the same way every time, so it's not much of a big deal. Overall, a pretty cool game, and graphically one of the most extreme of its time. But the question remains, was it scary? Were any of these games scary at all? Almost 40 years later, it's very unlikely for modern players to find any of this scary or intense. But perhaps in their time, there was someone too afraid to pop Haunted House into their ATARI consoles and had nightmares playing Uninvited. I wouldn't know. I started playing video games when titles like Fatal Frame 2 and Dead Space were already on the market. But what do you think? Did you get to play any of these games back in the day? Were they any scary? Let me know in the comments. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. I play and comment 5 horror games every week, so there will be something new for you to watch all the time. I'm also thinking of posting this kind of essays, rants or lists every once in a while. Have a very spoopy Halloween. Thanks a lot for watching. And remember, follow this account if you'd like to see more horror video games. See ya.